made the possibility of marketing reintegration a reality that has gotten world attention for its Yellow Ribbon campaign. We can market offender reintegration if we put our mind to it, and Singapore has shown us the way. So here we are in Singapore, a country that has introduced a bold innovation in the field. And today we're going to hear about two other innovations in our field from the other part of the world. One from Wales, that Corin Morgan-Armstrong is going to talk to us about. Families of offenders reaching out, truly reaching out to engage families of offenders in the reintegration process. And I know that Corin, since I've known him for many years, has given his heart and soul to that initiative. And then from the Netherlands, we're going to hear from Rien. He's the Chief Executive Officer of a non-governmental organization called Exodus. And when the program committee read his abstract, we were struck and immediately paid attention to what he was trying to communicate. Anne Frank in prisons, to use a piece of powerful literature to engage offenders, to get offenders to see that their lives could be different, to engage them, I think, from the heart rather than from the mind, right? So, I'm going to introduce Corin first. Corin is a graduate of Bath and Cardiff. He's got a BA in Honors in Religion and a Master's in Criminology and Criminal Justice. He joined G4S and YOI Park in South Wales in 97. And I think I met him in 98, right? Yeah, something like that. And Corin has developed his career from being a prison officer, a senior officer, a short-termer manager. I'm presuming that means managing short-term prisoners. Offending behavior treatment manager, resettlement and program senior manager, and currently he's the deputy head of offender management and interventions at Park. In 2007, Corin was awarded the Butler Trust at Buckingham Palace. I'm sure a proud moment in his career. And for the last few years, Corin has been developing the Supporting Families team that is doing, I believe, some groundbreaking work in truly bringing families into the rehabilitative and reintegration process. So without further ado, then I'll introduce Rien afterwards. I'm going to turn it to Corin. We're going to ask the speakers to speak for about 35 minutes. Then I'll cut them off, and hopefully we can engage the audience. Okay, so over to Corin.
Thank you, Frank. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Corin Morgan-Armstrong, and I'm here from G4S, representing Park Prison, which is in Wales, in the United Kingdom. I want to start just by acknowledging the wealth of expertise and experience that is in the room. It is very daunting and humbling to stand here, having glanced over the attendees on the information pack. So standing here before you guys is a real honour for me and a real privilege. I just wanted to say that before I kind of cracked into the slides. Also, just the scale of this ICPA conference is also very humbling, and I can assure you that the magnitude and scale of this conference has added considerably to my anxiety and my nerves about standing here and going through these slides with you this morning. Everything I'm going to talk about and show you this morning is based upon the pursuit of three goals. Firstly, to reduce the likelihood of reoffending with the individual. Secondly, to reduce the likelihood of intergenerational offending within the family. And thirdly, to increase the social inclusion and community inclusion for the families of offenders and offenders when they've been released. About 5 or 6 years ago, we put together a group called Park Supporting Families, which had these 3 goals in mind. The first thing we did, upon recommendation from the Ministry of Justice in the UK, was to go and visit Northern Ireland and Governor Austin Tracy in Maghaberry Prison. It was said that they were doing groundbreaking work out there with children and families in a Category A maximum security facility. We went out there and everything we heard was true, and Governor Tracy really was continues to be an inspirational governor in the remit of children and families. And his message to us was very simple, that if you're going to succeed in what you're trying to do, then you need to transform the agenda of children and families from what it has been historically and turn it into offending behaviour. If you can do that, then you'll succeed. And that was what we have tried to do, and so far, touch wood, it seems to be working. So the first slide there talks about the perception challenge, which I've just mentioned. The historical view of working with children and families of offenders has been one of kind of tree hugging, or guys who work in this area are care bears within the prison service. It's not really the the rough, tough stuff that goes on in prison. It's this kind of fringe activity that doesn't really matter. It's not very important. It's an add-on. There's no targets for it. So if you want to do it, crack on. But no one else is really doing it, and it doesn't matter. So the challenge has and continues to be to change that and turn it into tangible, credible, evidence-based reducing reoffending, because that's what it is. I'm sure there are many people in the room here, beside myself, who are well aware of the existing and emerging evidence base globally that supports the impact on reducing reoffending that working with children and families of offenders has. And this is what the challenge is to turn that perception from tree hugging into reducing reoffending. What we've done at Park is to work on creating and eliciting powerful cognitive dissonance. And what I mean by this is, we took an example from an offending behaviour programme that we ran for many years at Park called Focusing on Resettlement, which comes from T3 Associates. We put nearly 1,000 prisoners through this programme over a period of years, 10 at a time, so it was a lot of groups. And I had the privilege of teaching some of those groups myself over the years. And for me and my colleagues, what emerged was that there was a very powerful technique within that programme, and we wanted to draw the learning from that and kind of turbo boost it into our children and families remit. And that powerful technique was about working with prisoners individually and in a group and exploring the ideas between what they value or what they say they value on the one hand, and how they behave on the other, and what the gap is between the two. So when we, as we always do in the FOR programme, when we ask them to list the things that are most important to them, and then to prioritise them 1 to 10, it's no surprise that children and families pretty much always comes out as the number one. This is the thing I am least prepared to compromise in my life. No matter what happens, my children, my family, that's it, which is great. But we know, don't we, that their behaviour completely contradicts that. But we don't question that value. That value is sacred. It's the same as our value of children and families. But what we can explore with them is the gap between their behaviour and the value of children and families. And what we found was that when we were doing that, the motivation that was created, coming from the realisation that my behaviour is a long way off my family value, was very, very powerful. And for my money, from that programme, that was the most powerful thing, the most powerful ingredient, was that uncomfortable feeling, that cognitive dissonance that came from the realisation that what I'm doing in life is pushing me further and further away from what I value most in life. So with the Children and Families remit, what we're trying to do is to amplify what matters most, to amplify that value of children and families. And over the last few years, these are the types of things that we've encountered, that we've witnessed emerging. That children and families, as a technique of offending behaviour, becomes the reason to engage within the prison. So we have quite a large prison for the UK. We've got about 1,500 guys there at the moment. We offer a lot, but as you all know, getting men to engage in prison in what you offer them is, very different from just having it there. But what we found is that the Children and Families remit, using that technique of eliciting motivation through that value, has allowed men to find the motivation to engage in what is around them in the prison. So we have seen an uptake in education, in employment, in the health and fitness, people just having a basic self-respect for themselves and for the people around them, pursuing issues of accommodation, training, wanting to better themselves, taking seriously their responsibilities in terms of their financial situation, and pro-social behaviour. Furthermore, we've seen that the Children and Families value can evolve into the critical motivation to desist in destructive, isolating behaviours. So all the kind of reasons, all in terms of the criminal reasons why men are in prison, we have found that the Children and Families value can become a very powerful motivator in getting at those core criminogenic issues. And as it says there at the bottom of that slide, we very strongly believe that the Children and Families value can become the safety valve necessary to propel the individual upon the right path. So when offenders are scratching around trying to find motivation to engage in what is around them in the prison, sometimes that is very transitory, it's very fleeting. You might be motivated today, but not tomorrow. You might think it's a good idea to do this educational course today, maybe to get a job, when I get out. But next week, or 2 hours later, that may have faded away. But by using the Children and Families value, you have something that has longevity, that has true emotional connection to the individual, and they're far less willing to throw that motivation away. This isn't as peculiar as it looks. Basically what we've got here is the current and historical sentence template, and I'll explain this. You've got two triangles there. The top triangle represents, at its wide base, the amount of access prisoners in the UK tend to get for these different interventions. So at the top of the dark blue strip there, that represents the sentence planning process. So coming into the prison service in the UK, everyone will experience some form of sentence planning once convicted. It goes through an offender management process, goes through a lot of assessments. Everyone gets that. And underneath that, you've got the visits provision, which I'm going to go on to talk about because this is quite crucial. And in the UK, the same as everywhere, this is your right to have visits. It's your right to have contact with friends and family and your children. Now, whether or not individuals wish to take that up is another thing. And the manner in which prisons offer and provide visits is another thing altogether as well. But they're there, the facility is there, albeit it varies. Underneath that, going down, you've got resettlement provisions and employment, training opportunities. Underneath that, offending behaviour interventions, those programs that are accredited and those that are unaccredited. And as the triangle goes down, it represents that fewer and fewer prisoners are getting access to these particular things. And right at the bottom of the triangle is the Children and Families provision. So a lot of prisons in the UK don't really do anything for children and families. There are some shining examples out there as well, though, like Doncaster, for example, but many do very, very little. And yet, we know, we have found, and we're not alone, that this Children and Families value is such a powerful weapon, and yet it's hardly being used. So our approach at Park has been to turn the triangle upside down, so that the children and families provision trickles down through everything else. So all the existing structures in the prison, sentence planning, the provision for resettlement, employment, training, offending behaviour, everything that's already there has a children and families aspect inside it already. And all we are doing by turning it upside down is you're allowing the different aspects of the provisions to spark off each other. So within offending behaviour is a children and families aspect and ingredient. Within sentence planning is a children and families aspect. Within every part of the prison, everything that prisoners go through, there is the opportunity to work with the children and families remit. That has been our approach. There are two aspects of that upside down triangle, sorry, the right way up triangle, I should say, that I'm going to talk about more specifically. One of them is a change, a fundamental change that we've made to our visits provision, and the second one is the establishment last November of the Male Prisoners Family Interventions Unit. So firstly, to talk about the interventions-led visits provision. What we've done here is take what has historically in the UK always been in the control of the security departments. Within the prison, the visits has always been run by security. It's always fitted into their remit. And with that comes a certain approach, a certain model, a certain culture. We have changed that at Park Prison by working with security, but essentially removing the management and daily running of visits from security and putting it in essentially what is the rehabilitation department interventions. And by doing that, we've made subtle yet significant changes in the way visits runs. It still runs, it still has officers running it, and does all the things that visits should do, but there are subtle but significant changes. So one of the things that we've had to do there is make that cultural shift from what was traditionally an oppressive security provision to one that has subtle dynamic security processes, proactive security, but not so visible, smarter security. So we started from scratch by looking at the officers that were working there, many of whom didn't want to be working there, some of whom had a different skill set, shall we say. And we started by advertising for people, for officers in the prison who wanted to work in visits, who wanted to work with children and families, who could understand the importance of prison visits for rehabilitation. And we got a lot of response. And from that we sifted and we interviewed and we selected, and we try and protect those staff and look after them and motivate them because they want to be there, they understand what we're doing, and they want to be part of it, and they're excellent at it. We've also refreshed the policy and procedure. We've looked at the way families come into the prison from the start, the way children come into the prison, how they see it being searched, going through past the drug dogs, going into the visits hall. We looked at the physical space of visits, and we needed to make a lot of changes. We wanted to get away from that culture that seemed to say that if you're visiting a prisoner, you are by proxy a prisoner yourself, and your treatment was such. We wanted to move back towards a different approach, which was about the families and the children are a key aspect of the prisoner's rehabilitation. They're the second bit. They're the other 50%, cross the bridge. No matter what we do with prisoners, if we don't involve the outside, and more exclusively if we don't involve their families in that, then really we're just kind of wishing and hoping that things work out when they get out. We have a big team of volunteers that supports the family visit process as well as third sector community support from different agencies, national and local. I have to say also that G4S, the company I work for, have been very supportive in promoting this innovation and supporting it. They understand it, they can see the benefits of it. And in so doing, they created a family interventions team in the UK, which looks at all the G4S prisons, the way all the visits are run, all the family interventions, and we try and have a coordinated approach that is innovative and effective. Similarly, I would have to say the Ministry of Justice in the UK has been very interested and has visited what we're doing and is again very supportive. Our motivation and objective with this new form of visits is to be able to treat every visit as an opportunity for better whole family engagement. To progress the awareness and commitment that visits is an intervention. A visit is an opportunity to reduce reoffending. Every visit is an opportunity to reduce reoffending. So getting away from that core function, it's just a prison visit, it's just their entitlement, who cares how it goes, it doesn't really matter, to this is vital as part of this individual's rehabilitation. And the more we can support his engagement with his family and his children, the more likely we are to increase his chances of rehabilitation, going out, not coming back. Not only that, we know that in Wales, for example, we have a very high statistical ratio of young boys following dad into prison. We know that if you take 10 prisoners, 10 male prisoners in Wales, all who have sons, 6 out of those 10 sons will go to prison also. That is the statistic, 6 out of 10. So it's not just about the prisoner, as I said at the top, it's also about the next generation. To increase dynamic proactive security policy, and it might seem slightly bizarre moving visits from security to rehabilitation, but believe it or not, can increase and make better security policy and practice. We know that before we took over visits, there was an average of 3 hands-on physical removals from the visits hall each month, 3 a month. In the year and a half that we've been doing it, we haven't had to remove anyone physically from the visits hall because the officers are working in a different way. They have a different approach, a different understanding. We also know, in terms of drug dog indications on visitors coming in to the visits hall, has dramatically reduced by almost 80% because of the way we refresh the process by looking at it again in families' perspective, working with volunteers in the area where families book in, making it more comfortable, more approachable for families to go and talk to people that they might be worried. I don't want to bring this in to the prison. I'm under pressure to do so. I don't want to do it. But who can I talk to about it? To work towards the involvement of interventions-led visits and a family interventions unit in all G4S prisons. I'm going to talk a little bit about the family interventions unit now. Got some snaps there that we were able to smuggle out from the unit just the other day. What we're trying to do with this residential unit, we've got 60 places on there. We opened it last November. And the focus of this family interventions unit is to engage the prisoners with their children, with their family, in a series of different group interventions and individual assessment and processes so that we can look at assessing and repairing, recovering, making better parent skills, relationships, family links, resettlement, by involving the family, not just working with the prisoner, not just looking at 50%, looking at the whole picture, the whole reasons, all the reasons, with the children, with the family. Slightly controversial, I guess, to be doing that in a prison, to be having running programs where the partners are coming inside the prison, with the prisoners, in group rooms. Sometimes we work with just the partners, and we don't have the prisoners there at all. Sometimes we just have the children there. All sorts of different things going on, and we're doing it because we know it works, because we know it's effective. We don't have to keep doing it the same way. The little snap in the bottom right-hand corner there of the cell door, just above there, is too small to see, but those are little mission statements. So there's 2 guys sharing that cell number 35. When they come onto the unit, we ask them to write down their purpose of being on there. There's a lot of interest. in getting onto that unit. It's a nice unit, and there are some privileges of being on there. But when prisoners realise what they have to do when they're on there, 90% of them withdraw their application because they know that they're not ready or they don't want to face their family and their children and get everything out in the open. They're not ready for that or they don't want to do it. Maybe there's more sentences in them yet. But for the 10, 20% that do apply, they are ready. And we can see that readiness by the motivational statements that they make, that we stick up above their door. They're their testaments. We put it there so that every time they go in and out of their door, they see it. It's there as a reminder. This is why I'm on this unit. To better myself. To better work with my family. To be a better father. Because I don't want my son to follow me into prison. Every time in and out of the door. We have a lot of community projects that we run on that wing also. On the top left-hand corner, we've got a snap there of some of the agencies and the charities that prisoners donate money to, like Bernardo's and ActionAid, sponsoring children in different countries, to get some empathy for children on the other side of the world, making it a little bit more comfortable for them later on when we're talking about their children. So making it a little bit safer for them by doing something that's a long way away, because we know that soon enough we'll be talking about your children. And we need to do that in a way that is comfortable and effective for them, rather than just slamming it in their face straight away. I mentioned earlier on the size of the prison, 1,500 men. We're a category B, which is a kind of medium security. We take prisoners as young as 13, 14 years old. We have a large sex offender population as well as young offenders and adults. So we would be classed as one of the most complex prisons in the UK in terms of what we're housing, what we're looking after, and what we're trying to do. I mentioned also recruiting officers to work with children and families. It's the same for management, it's the same for myself. We all have to have a way of working that is different. Our approach, our belief has to be there. Our understanding of the links between children and families and reducing reoffending. That we're not the fluffy Care Bears. This is about offending behaviour. Cultural and institutional support is critical. The senior management team, the director, the company, everyone has had to understand. We've had to pitch what we're doing to get that support. Talked about the Family Interventions Unit, and there's a list there of some of the different programs that we run. I'm going to mention two very briefly. Firstly, the Learning Together Club. This is a homework club. So when guys have enrolled in this particular program, we bring their children in, they bring their schoolwork with them after school, the mums bring them in, but then we take the mums out. And so dad and child visit together. And the father has done a course so that he understands the curriculum of the children, so he has the skills to sit down and do the homework. Because I know that there'll be a lot of them that wouldn't have the skills to do that, and it would be son teaching dad. So we have to upskill the dads first, so that they feel comfortable and confident to do that. We feed them dinner, and it's a very, very successful program. Some of the feedback we've had there from the different prisoners that have gone through that. My son is proud to show me what he's doing in school. He's opened my eyes to what I need to do. The second program I'm going to briefly mention is called Impact. And this is this is a substance misuse program that runs in the community. We were approached to pilot it at Park, and we've done so very successfully. This works with the whole family. So 6 families all working together on substance misuse. Mum, dad, children. Previously, that would only just be dad, and mum might not know anything about it. Children probably wouldn't, but of course the children do. Children do know what's going on. We found that out when we piloted this program. These guys are the first 6 prisoners that graduated through the Impact program, standing there looking very proud, and quite rightly. It's a hard program for them to do. They had to face up to some very raw emotions from their children and from their partners. There was no hiding place on this program. It was very effective. There's some of the kids there. It's just a snap of the room where we do it. All the children that did that programme became Facebook links afterwards. So there was, even after our programme, there was further kind of community support that they made amongst themselves. They were no longer on their own with a dad who was a drug user. They had someone else they could talk to their own age who understood difficulties and the emotions. There was a cake that we had at the end, that's what you might like to see there. The last thing I'm going to talk about very quickly is a lottery-funded project that we were approached to design called Invisible Walls. And this is about engaging up to 20 families a year over a 4-year period, where we work with the whole family, the prisoner graduating through the family interventions unit, working with the visits in the way I've described, engaging third sector support, post-release support for up to 6 months with a family mentor who's worked with the whole family whilst in custody and post-release. So there's 3 hubs of activity: the prison, pre-release, community, post-release, and a transitional hub, which is kind of pre-post-release, where everything comes together. And I mentioned those desired outcomes earlier on. But a couple of pictures there that I think say a lot. The one on the left there, this is drawn by one of the children on the MPAC programme, which says, my dad is in his room alone, my mum is in her room alone, and then after the MPAC programme, we come together as a family. I think that picture says a lot, without any explanation, about the effectiveness and the importance of the Children and Families remit for reducing reoffending. Another one there, which says, me, Jordan and Mum and Terry do whatever we wanted to do in the home. But now we discuss things as a family. Again, a little boy had drawn that from the MPAC programme. The last thing I wanted to say was that when we started the Family Interventions Unit in November, we linked that to this new way of working with visits. I got kind of caught up personally in thinking that it was significant that we were like the first to be doing this type of thing. The first to have opened this unit in the UK that worked exclusively in this way. Where I've since come to realise that actually that is meaningless. All that really matters is that it's done, it's doable, it can be replicated, it works, and hopefully others will take something from what we're doing and use it in their own establishments and evolve the remit even further than we have imagined. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been my absolute honour to talk to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Corin. Pioneer. It's interesting how no matter how long we stay in this business, we can still see exciting new developments. Thank you again, Corin. I'm not going to open it up to questions just now. I thought we would do it at the end, if that's okay with you, because I'd like to turn it to Rien Timmer. He's the chief executive of Exodus, which is a non-governmental organization in the Netherlands. And his background, interestingly, is as a business economist. And I asked him earlier why he was involved in this kind of work as a business economist. And he had a good answer, but you'll probably tell the audience, won't you? And he's going to be talking to us about another, I think, just a very interesting innovation. And also tell us a little bit about what Exodus does. So, I'll turn it to Rien.
Thank you. Well, indeed, it's an honor for me to speak to such a distinguished public of experts in imprisonment and reintegration. It makes me humble because who am I as a business economist in the field of laws, penitentiary and social work? Well, to start with that question, who am I? As CEO of the Association Exodus Netherlands, I am leading this organization since nearly 9 years now, after earlier experiences in working for a labor union and an employers association. And perhaps that's the answer to the question as well. I think all these different fields have much to do with each other, because finally our community just works when enterprises, when individuals and when politics work together in making real efforts to bring people to their destination. In this presentation, does it work? Not yet. Okay. Yep. In this presentation, I will give you some information about our organization. I will tell you about our philosophy on how to stimulate change in the lives of detainees and former detainees. After that, I will introduce you to the person and life of the young girl Anne Frank, and to the ins and outs of our project Anne Frank in prison. I will show you how the role model of Anne Frank could be a kind of Trojan horse to get discussion with detainees about their own behavior, their own life and future. And finally, I will look ahead to the effects of this project and to the continuation of this and comparable initiatives in the Netherlands, but perhaps in other countries too. But let me start to introduce to you our organization Exodus. Founded as a small local initiative by prison chaplains, volunteers and churches in The Hague, we have been growing out in 30 years, yes, we have some celebrations this year, to a nationwide private network of professionals and volunteers in the Netherlands. We offer programs for offenders and ex-offenders in residential and ambulant forms during and after imprisonment. As a private organization, we think it is important to inform the public about the consequences of imprisonment and the difficulties of re-entry. To stimulate the awareness about those subjects is not just important because of fundraising reasons, but even more because the final success of our work will depend on the willingness of society to give a new chance to detainees as a colleague, a friend, a family member, a neighbor. And that brings us to our mission statement, which is much wider than just giving assistance to detainees and ex-detainees. Our organization consists of a national office offering supportive services to Exodus houses spread over the country on 11 locations. In such an Exodus house, an offender follows an intensive re-entry program of 6 months until 2 years, preparing him or her step by step for a non-criminal future. A growing group of residents of our Exodus houses is sent to us by a judge or by the prison governor. They follow our program under juridical rules and under the responsibility and supervision of the probation officer. In other cases, a former detainee enters our house on a voluntary basis after his formal release. Further on, our organization counts more than 40 groups of volunteers offering all kinds of support in prison, mostly in connection with the prison chaplaincy. Other groups of volunteers offer assistance to individual former prisoners and act as buddies to them during the complicated period after imprisonment. A growing number of volunteers offer assistance to children of prisoners. Together with the prison services, we organize, usually at a monthly basis, special father-children meetings in prisons. In that way, we stimulate the bond between parent and child and offer the father a chance to fill in a small part of his paternity, a stimulus to the future, to the imprisoned parent as well as to the child. Together with other volunteers, active in writing, assisting in Exodus houses and fulfilling many more tasks, all those persons form a group of more than 1900 role models and ambassadors to our work, just as the more than 230 professional workers. As a network organization, of course, we are strongly dependent of our relations with partners in society, not just for finances, but even more to build a firm chain of organizations and persons to find solutions to the multi-problematic lives of so many detainees. The results of our work have been quite positive, according to various scientific studies. Recidivism of our residents drops with 10 till 25% compared to comparable groups who not followed our programs. Generally spoken, the longer an ex-offender managed to stay in the program, the lower his rate of recidivism. What are the underlying essentials to this positive outcome? We are convinced that in our work, and hopefully the next slide will appear, there we go. We are convinced that in our work there is never just one solution to criminality. It's always about a combination of factors. Nevertheless, speaking about the essentials, I like to mention a few ones. First, the importance of a holistic approach. I will come back to that. Then the importance of connectability with society. If someone feels responsibility to other people, to a group of people in society, in sports, at church, an association, he will take up another role in society. Third, a small-scale help in small units and groups, with emphasis of the personal responsibility. This also means that a personal approach is very important. And that looking for the meaning of your personal life is a leading theme. That the absence of addictions is compulsory, and that we are quite clear about the rules and about what will be tolerated and what not. The mentioned holistic approach and connectability leads to the 4 keys of society a former detainee needs to fill in. In the Dutch language, the 4 W's of first wonen, housing. A stable and affordable housing situation, healthy and clean, and with responsibility for the surroundings. Second, werken, working. Spending your days in a meaningful way with a paid job, voluntarial work or studies, earning money and using your talents to your own and to other benefits. Well, the third one is in Dutch not a very correct word, but you will recognize it in English. It's about relationship, not just wife, but it could be another kind of loving partner, man or woman, or a diversity of interpersonal relationships with friends, acquaintances, family, being a part of a stable and positive social network. That, in most cases, helps to prevent falling back in criminality. And finally, but closely related to the 3 mentioned keys, the underlying key of why. Waarom? What makes my life a meaningful life? What or who gives significant importance to my life? A hobby, a talent, my beloved ones, friends, my religious beliefs in God? The answer is always personal and never standard. But the answer will always help you to find your way out of the desert. The desert of the past, as is suggested by our biblical name, Exodus, referring to the story of finding the way to the promised meaningful land. As you see, with small scale, we really mean small scale. Our houses and units contain a maximum of 18 till 21 person rooms, cozy and homely, in the heart of the community, and with the usual interaction with neighbors. On these photos you see our houses in Amsterdam, to the left a former nursery school, and in Rotterdam a former summer hostel for employees of post offices. As an illustration of the emphasis on the personal responsibility of offenders, I mentioned that we always speak to them as residents and as buddy contacts, as comrades, not as clients, not as dependents or needy, or not as offenders. His problems are his problems. His problematic life is his problematic life. We are not the ones to punish him. by bad behavior, he punishes himself and his surroundings. We just offer him to walk along for a while in his life, supporting him to find the right directions. That also means that day-to-day activities in an Exodus house are carried out by the residents themselves. Altogether, this makes our one-year program a standard program full of non-standards, because every time it has to be adapted to the personal situation, the personal possibilities and backgrounds of the resident. And in addition, also the local circumstances on the labor and housing market will have their influences. However, personal motivation to real change in life is essential. And therefore, the source of motivation in your life is such an essential part in all discussions, personal and group-wise, during the program. What or who is or could be your personal motivator? And how can we help you to transform that motivator to an internal force, keeping you going on in the right directions? Although I realize a program like ours gives the impression of being soft and welfare-oriented, nevertheless, in our opinion, being clear about the rules and agreements has to be part of the deal as well. Negative behavior does give negative consequences, but positive behavior has to be rewarded as well. Just as in normal life, the various parts of the Exodus program are not optional. Like a jigsaw puzzle, the best result will be shown if all pieces fit. So far, perhaps I did not tell you much news. Indeed, our program does have a lot of similarities with the upbringing of your own children, or maybe with the upbringing and education you would have liked to receive of your own parents and teachers. Perhaps you should ask why they didn't do so. Isn't it strange that in most prisons in the world of the environment, that in most prisons in the world, the environment enforces exactly the opposite of what we really want to reach in the lives of our detainees. Where we want them to change to responsible, independent, social and honest citizens, we offer them often an enduring period in big groups with bad group influences, with a concentration on punishment for bad behavior instead of rewarding good behavior, in surroundings where people feel more like a number than an individual person, taking away most of the personal responsibilities, in isolation of society and even of those who probably could be a motivational factor in one's future life. Prison brings a lot of conflicts with what we really want to reach with imprisonment. And at this moment, I would like to introduce you to the person and life of a totally different person than our prisoners. Anne Frank, the young girl of this photo. Just a normal girl. And if history hadn't changed her life so badly, perhaps you and I never would have heard about her. Born in Germany in 1929, she fled with her family from the Hitler regime to the apparently safe city of Amsterdam. There she grew up as a normal teenage girl in a normal family, not poor, not rich, quite educated, in a rather liberal Jewish atmosphere. Nevertheless, after the occupation of Holland by the Nazi regime in May 1940, her life became more and more difficult and dangerous. Her, like those others with Jewish backgrounds. Her father developed then the plan to get into shelter for a longer period, in the so-called Achterhuis, a hidden part of the canal house where he had his offices. With the help of some colleagues and friends, Anne, her parents and her sister Margot spent more than 2 years in this hiding place together with 4 other Jewish persons. Being stuck together for such a long period in such a small space with so many possible dangers from outside made this period a very intensive and special one for the lively and intelligent Anne. After 2 years, quite suddenly, the hidden ones get founded by police officers. All 8 people in hiding get arrested and transported to various concentration camps. All, except Father Otto Frank, die in those camps. Anne dies in Auschwitz, probably just shortly before liberation, because of illness and exhaustion. Back in Holland, Father Otto receives the notes of Anne's diary, written during the 2 years in captivity in the hidden shelter. This story, written to the non-existent girlfriend Kitty, is now one of the most printed books in the world, translated in dozens of languages. Her life and her works are leading in the work of various Anne Frank foundations in the world, and her shelter is one of the most visited musea in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam, with over 1 million visitors each year. What makes this diary of Anne Frank so special and inspiring to so many people? Also, as you will see, to people in prisons. First of all, it is a very personal book, with personal feelings. It was written in captivity, not in prison, but nevertheless in a quite comparable situation, not chosen by the captivated herself. She writes the book in a very essential period of her life, the age of 11, 12, 13 years old, changing from a child to an adult, which makes that most of the feelings and situations she writes about are very recognizable, even although written 60 years ago. That makes it a coming-of-age book, describing the experiences of somebody locked up while dreaming about her bright future. And not at least, the diary gives us some insight in the severe personal consequences of discriminations against people. If we have a look at a big part of the population of our prisons, the story of Anne Frank makes her to a very suitable example and role model to many of our inmates. She is a very identifiable person, a normal girl with day-to-day dreams and sorrows, undergoing a situation of captivity and isolation which is absolutely against her will, struggling with her feelings and thoughts, with irritation against fellow prisoners, with anger against authorities, and about the consequences of being locked up, with dreams about her own future in a situation with a lack of perspective, with grief about the consequences of discrimination. And despite this isolation and grievances, her story raises a liveliness, a positive behavior, while she goes on making plans and believing in a better future. It is this combination of factors that form the basis of the project Anne Frank in Prison, as an example of how to embed the real story of an inspiring person into the desired development of prisoners. In short, the project is to be described as an elaborated and more extended version of earlier projects in the UK, USA and Germany. The project is developed by Exodus in strong cooperation with the Anne Frank Foundation and with the prison chaplaincy of 7 denominations: Protestant, Roman Catholic, Muslim, Buddhist, Hinduist, Jewish and humanistic. The essence of the project is to build up a temporal exhibition within prison walls about life and themes of Anne Frank's diary. Through the prison chaplaincy, a group of prisoners is selected to be trained as temporal guide at the exhibition. All prisoners are subsequently invited to visit the exhibition, guided by their fellow prisoners, and to join in various other related activities, such as discussion groups with the chaplaincy, often with the cooperation of volunteers from outside prison. For instance, former war victims, children of war victims, children of persons who played a role in war as collaborator or betrayer. We organize writing workshops with renowned writers about how to write your own diary, how to write stories, how to write about your own emotions and feelings. And we introduce various art workshops about the themes of the exhibition, or in producing your own booklet. Very important in the whole project is the official opening. These are very remarkable moments because of the experience of coming together with people of so many ethnic and religious backgrounds around a common shared theme. External guests are guided by the prisoners through the exhibition. Discussions between inmates and with external guests are initiated. Some short lectures of people from within and from outside the prison walls give some insight in the personal relations people feel with the story of Anne Frank. And the well-known artists translate this to a musical contribution. Highlight of this opening is the official graduation ceremony of the trained guides. They receive a certificate and get the chance to tell something about what they have learned and experienced. Perhaps most important, they really get responsibilities, also towards the guests, and not only in being a good guide. Most important is being the messenger of an important message, of a life lesson. In that way, this project for us is an example of using the diary of Anne Frank as a Trojan horse, and not the one you might have on your computer. As a way to use her story to tell another underlying story about important and social themes like tolerance and discrimination, about the possibilities and strengths of multi-ethnic collaboration, about self-reflection on your own life, hearing about somebody else's life in captivity, experiencing meetings with other role models from society, not always the rich and the famous, but especially normal people making special choices in normal lives. And in this manner, inspiring and stimulating people on setting special steps towards a normal life. That means that not just the story of Anne Frank herself is important, but the message within. It also means that a project like this is important because it puts important questions. Those questions are more important than the answer, because finally every prison has to make its own choices in life. Our experiences have learned us too that projects like this are transferable to different cultures and religions. Although I am convinced that Anne Frank could inspire people from many backgrounds, I'm sure too that every country, every culture or religion will have its own role models and inspiring stories. Whether living examples or historic stories, everywhere outside prison walls are important role models for prisoners on how to pick up responsibility for their own lives. All for good, but what can we say about concrete results of projects like the Anne Frank project? For the UK, the program is still running. More and more prisons want to book the exhibition. The experiences in the USA and Germany are comparably positive, although the projects are implemented there on a smaller scale. Generally mentioned, short-term results, which I recognize in our Dutch experience, are first of all an improvement in atmosphere in prisons, less violence, also between prisoners of different races and religions, and better cooperation between prisoners and staff. As a supplement to those experiences, I can mention for the Netherlands that we noticed among the participants of the project a growing interest to participate in the Exodus program after release, or as a final part of the imprisonment. Apparently, detainees get stimulated to really set a step forward to a more positive future. Not less important is the positive effect of a project like this to the world outside prisons. The willingness of all kinds of persons to cooperate in a project like this inside prison walls is tremendous. Even more special, this willingness comes from people of very different backgrounds and ages. And also, a project like this does draw a lot of positive publicity, which surely helps in the general willingness to give new chances to detainees. That brought us to the decision to continue the project. Next year, in combination with the introduction of other workshops and activities and with the commitment of professionals. but also with the commitment of volunteers and of the prison staff, who in many cases are themselves the day-to-day role models for prisoners as well. Good news for those plans is that the Dutch prison system opens more and more towards society, as is told in the right now hold parallel session behind that wall, despite severe political pressure to just tougher punishment. Well, and what might be the lesson for you from this presentation? Perhaps the story of Anne Frank might help your prisoners as well to take up responsibility for a different future. But if she is not the best example in your country, then I am sure your own country and your own local community has its own examples of people who really were and are role models in changing lives without a future into valuable and inspiring new lives. Maybe even your own prison houses the best future examples. Let's, for that reason, finish with a short publicity film with some of those future role models. A film broadcasted various times at Dutch television. Watch it, keeping in mind that 3 of the actors of this film you see are former detainees, now residing in an Exodus house. The other 3 are professional actors. I wonder who of you will guess the true ones, the true detainees. And I gladly invite the winner of this guess to pay a visit to one of our houses of Exodus in Holland.
Thank you, Rien. Two wonderful examples. You were given a challenge this morning to bring something home, bring a practice, an idea back home with you. I think we just had 2 wonderful examples, full of ideas. A lot of communality, connections, the personal approach, meaning, values. In both of the presentations, those things were highlighted. I hope that your minds were clicking as you heard the presentations, moving and thinking about what it might mean in your country, in your jurisdiction, in your agency. It's always a risk to open it up to the audience because someone has to be the daring person and ask the first question. But we do have 15 minutes. There's a microphone. Well, I can always count on Richard Harding, can't I? Okay. Richard, please.
Thank you. They were wonderful presentations, but I do have to ask a question about evaluation. Now, Corin referred to an imminent or planned research paper which suggests you don't yet have firm figures on the impact on recidivism, and Rien referred to, rather as an aside, to a 25% impact on reoffending through the Exodus programme. I just wonder if each of you could say a little bit more about how, what the plans are for further evaluation, how rigorous in your case when the present evaluations are. Thank you.
Go ahead. I think the mics work. Corin. There you go.
Hello? Okay. anticipated that question. There has been a lot of research, particularly over the last kind of 15, 20 years, and that's gaining momentum now. I mean, in the UK, some of the most influential pieces of research I'll cite the Social Exclusion Unit report of 2002, which is still used today in terms of informing policy and practice. An aspect of that research stated that in terms of prisons and family engagement, including visits, if a convicted prisoner can maintain or increase healthy family relations whilst in custody, is up to 6 times less likely to re-offend. Other reports I just briefly mentioned would be Every Child Matters, Every Family Matters, which were commissioned by the Ministry of Justice or the Home Office to Barnardo's, the national children's charity. I'd also like to mention a charity called Time for Families, which runs programs in the UK, which originated in the USA, which have a 40-year reconviction study attached to it, which obviously is very promising, otherwise they wouldn't promote it. I'd also like to mention the new Philanthropic Capital report, which came out in April this year. I mention that one because it's slightly different from the others insofar as it cites the financial savings for government made if prisoners have regular and healthy family contact whilst in prison, compared to prisoners who do not have family contact whilst in prison, and the considerable saving that is involved in that. With regards to the projects that I talked about, there are several smaller pieces of research, but I think still significant even though they are smaller. We've had 2 pieces that were presented in Barcelona this year at a psychology conference, one which was based upon the effectiveness of the family intervention visits, that we do kind of special family day visits, and the second one based on the unit I mentioned itself, both of which are available on the internet. Could go on. Professor Boswell, who works attached to Safeground UK, has published a number of documents on the effectiveness of the Safeground UK Fathers Inside Family Man projects. Also, Professor Maguire, who's the director of the Wales Centre for Crime and Social Justice, which represents the 8 universities in Wales, is attached to the lottery project I mentioned. I'll stop there.
Well, you were prepared, weren't you, Corin? Oh, he got you, didn't he, Richard? What about Rien?
Well, I invite you to read the researches about our program. They are in Dutch, so probably you have to study a bit longer. But to give a short side on it, every 2 years our program is being researched by the Leiden University. Last time in combination with the Scientific Institution of the Ministry of Justice. And that's important for us because then we can use the official numbers of the Ministry of Justice and compare to those numbers. Especially because in that case we can compare the same kind of groups with the same backgrounds, the same ages, the same kind of risk factors. And from that last research, which was published last year in 2010, we learned that for the same group in a period of 2 till 4 years, our former residents have a lower recidivism rate of 10 till 25%, and the difference between that comes from the period they have been in the Exodus program. And what is quite remarkable that even if a person hasn't finished the program in a proper way, so according to our conditions in a positive way, even if he hasn't finished it in a proper way, but he has stayed for a long period, so 1 year or longer, then still his recidivism rate will be lower. So not our quite high standards are more important, but the duration of the commitment in the program is more important. And some other results were that the holistic approach, so not just a course on social behavior, but offering a social environment to act as a social person will help more, and especially also the connection with volunteers makes quite a big difference with other programs.
Wonderful, thank you. True innovation isn't just about creativity, it's about getting results, isn't it? So, thank you guys. Anybody else?
Hello, Robert Epstein from the Israel Prison Service. First of all, thank you to both of you for excellent and inspiring presentations. Specifically a question for Rien. In Israel, obviously the Holocaust figures very largely in the education system and in the identity of the country, both for the uniqueness to the Jewish people and also for its universal message. And similarly so in the Israel Prison Service, Holocaust education is a very strong part of education, both of prisoners, and we have an initiative called Victory of the Spirit, in which many prisoners are taken to the Ghetto Fighters Museum, and as well as that, all trainees, both prison guards and also officers, are taken to Yad Vashem, which is the national Holocaust Memorial and Museum. And largely, as part of the training, wardens, guards, and officers are allowed to take their own conclusions, but also we see in it a value as the larger systemic issue of humanity, of universal message, of creating a unique and humanitarian environment in the Israeli prison service. And my question really is whether or not in the Anne Frank project, if you find it also has an impact on the system and an impact on the environment of the prison service, not just on the prisoners themselves.
Yeah, it has very much. Prison members of staff has reported that to us, and well, we see it happen. I think this is one of the first projects that all denominations of the prison chaplaincy really can work together with. And we had in the beginning some discussions with the chaplaincy of the Muslim background. But then we found out that there is also a part of this exhibition telling about a small group of soldiers from Morocco who helped liberating Europe and who played a role in the same Second World War. And that made a bridge to the Muslim population, which is quite big in our prisons. Because through this group of militaries from Morocco who have suffered as well and who have died as well in this war, we took the possibility to make it really a universal theme. It's true that the Holocaust and the Anne Frank story for many of the prisoners in Holland is quite an unknown story. On schools, there's much education about the Second World War, but for people with a Moroccan or a Turkish background, or also for people with a background on the Antilles, the Second World War and the Holocaust seems to be quite far away, or even a story of the enemy, so not your story. And this project, we have realized that this project gives an opportunity to put it on a more universal level, because finally, and I spoke to many of those with Muslim and Antillian backgrounds too, finally they realized that this is a story about how to mingle different people, how to act between different races and different cultures, and still, well, perhaps not being friends, but at least work together. And that really helps to make a better atmosphere in prison, but I'm sure that it also helps to realize about responsibilities after prison, because most of those people will meet each other in the same quarters, and they are not the best quarters in our cities.
Thank you. One more quick question, if there is one. Anybody? Going once, twice? Okay. Yell it out.
from Nigeria. My question is for Corin. What were the exact criteria that you used to select those that were enrolled in the program? Because from what you've told us, it is just motivation. I will show that it's not just selected the well-motivated. So they have done better in the rest of the information that you gave them. So what were the exact criteria for selecting those that were enrolled in the program?
Okay, you're right in what you're saying. The aspect of motivation is a shifting dynamic, which has a starting point, obviously. In terms of the family interventions unit, the kind of criteria for getting on there is firmly based with what we class as the offender management unit, which is the kind of the risk and need assessment process. So it's a very broad criteria, and it needs to be. It's encompassing of offenders who perhaps don't have family at all, or just have a friend, or maybe don't even have anyone at all, because family can be a social network as well as anything else. But the need and risk are taken very importantly. Obviously, for some offenders who've committed particular offences, it wouldn't be appropriate for us to be connecting them with their families, or in some cases their families don't want to be connected with them. So in terms of their offending, that is a key criteria. Sentence length is also important. I chose not to pitch this work at the beginning of an offender's sentence, rather the second half or even the last third, depending on the length of sentence. What I really want is for guys to graduate through this unit and be released. That's, I think, the most effective way in terms of resettlement. I know a lot of rhetoric would state that resettlement starts, the first day they walk in. I'm not so sure about that in reality. I think for most effective resettlement, it needs to be pitched at a particular time in the sentence. So that would be the last third or thereabouts. We don't exclude prisoners onto the unit because of behavioural problems, if they, in terms of where they are within the prison system at the time. What we say to them is, you can come onto our unit on a standard regime, as opposed to being on an enhanced regime. But we expect, once you're on the unit, we expect you to raise your standards in terms of the way you are, the way you behave, and your attitude. And what we found is that, which I didn't say in my presentation, was that by being on the unit itself, prisoners have said, and we've recorded these in some vignettes which I've given to Frank, prisoners have said that actually just being on the unit has changed me, without even doing any of the programs at all, because of the way we set the unit up, because of the attitude of the men that have been on there already. There's a kind of rolling process. And they might come on there still with the gangster swagger, but they lose that because no one else is doing it. And so in terms of the criteria, it's quite broad, but we have high expectations, but the bottom line would be risk and need. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Corin. Corin has a DVD, a BBC documentary, right? That if we can figure out a way to free up a room to show it sometime during the conference, we'll do that. Otherwise, maybe you can approach Corin if you're interested. We're gonna have to break. Lunch is served outside the foyer. I've been given a note. I want to make a point that the Russian Federal System workshop will be in W02 at 3:30 this afternoon. And I want you all to give a warm hand to our two speakers. Thank you. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.